Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our webinar on harmony in the home. Now, recently I saw an old poem and it goes something like this. One of my kids sabotaged my alarm clock. I woke up late and I was late for work. I ran to have a shower and there was no hot water and the shampoo had gone. I ran down to have breakfast. I was late for work and I tripped on my kids' toys and I was late for work. At the breakfast table, my toddler spilled milk into my briefcase and I was late for work. But it's a great day. You know why? Because it means I have a family. But think about it. Not everybody has harmony in the home. To speak about this tonight are two experts. They're going to discuss the problems and some of the solutions. Dr. Yael Kadish and Rabbi Michael Katz. Dr. Kadish, amongst other things, is the principal psychologist at Tara Hospital. She's both a psychoanalyst and a psychologist. She presents her work both at local and international conferences. And Rabbi Katz, beloved Rabbi Katz, spends much of his day counseling families. So guys, thank you for making the time and thank you for doing this, and over to you. Doctor?
Thank you so much, Rabbi. So the topic we're talking about tonight it's always an important one, but I think in these very difficult times that we have, it takes on, or it's even more difficult than before to maintain harmony in the home. And people are really struggling. They're struggling emotionally and psychologically. And we know this, but unfortunately, we can't spend enough time focusing on this because people are so worried about the physical ramifications of the virus, doing all of the things that they have to suddenly now do, like doing homeschooling for children, having been in lockdown, seeing that everything's okay in the home, and managing in ways that we've never had to manage before. So that really presents a challenge. How do you keep things healthy in the family? Which is different to being happy. We can't be happy all the time, but we have to survive this time in our lives. And what's really difficult is that we have lost a sense of certainty that we may have had before. Like, when is this going to end? When is life going to return to normal? We just don't know. And human beings aren't great at tolerating uncertainty. We like to know things. We want to feel in control. And of course, we're never really in control of our lives. But this pandemic has really taught us that, if it's taught us one thing. And so people are really struggling. And so tonight, I think, Rabbi, you and I will just talk about it from the perspectives of a psychologist and of a rabbi, and try and find a way to help people to come to terms with this time, because there are no magic solutions and there's no, there are no quick and easy answers, but there are things that can be done. There are ways that maybe can make life more bearable during this time, and even maybe to be enriching our lives coming through this time.
Absolutely. So I think that, first of all, it's an honor to be able to share the platform with you, Dr. Kadish, this evening, and hopefully to be able to share some thoughts. As you said, first of all, about some of the issues, some of the problems, and perhaps while this cannot be all exhaustive and it cannot possibly, in this short time frame that we have at our disposal, we can't possibly hope to cover everything, but perhaps just to make a few suggestions, and of course, suggestions that will come from your field of expertise, from the psychologist's point of view, and just chatting beforehand, hearing that there has certainly, while we're talking about spikes, and it's become some of the terminology that we've learned over this period of time is also new to us all. And we know what a spike is, but there's been a spike in psychological issues over this period of time, and how perhaps those can be dealt with. And then, of course, if I may, at some stage, we'll suggest a few spiritual ideas, a few Jewish ideas, a few Torah ideas in how we can hopefully, as we said, regain or retain the harmony that we had before and that we hopefully will have now and that we hopefully will be able to embroider upon going forward. So perhaps, Doctor, if you'd like to continue, we can hopefully compare some notes as we go along.
Okay, that sounds great. And I think that the audience is invited to send any questions to us that they may have. And after a period of time, I think we'll be sent the questions and try to answer them so there can be some kind of engagement, because we do have a very short amount of time for this topic. But what we're seeing, worldwide, we're seeing at least 50% of people are struggling with really increased levels of anxiety and panic. There was a local study done by the South African Depression and Anxiety Support Group on quite a large number of participants who found this, and that echoed a study in America that found a very similar thing. So we're seeing that anxiety, helplessness, and panic are really on the increase, as well as sleep problems. And it's very interesting, but very, concerning that 70 to 80% of people worldwide are reporting sleep problems. And sleep is so intimately tied to our mental health and everything we do. So there are, increasing problems psychologically and emotionally, and with people who already maybe had psychological struggles, that's now exacerbated. So in the hospitals, we're seeing really an increase in that. But tonight's talk, we can't address everything. And the talk's also not to say that everyone's going through similar things, because we know different industries have been affected differently in ways that no one could ever have predicted. So people are really having to grapple with unexpected things, just a whole sense of being uprooted. So I think if people are really struggling and they're finding that they're feeling really depressed, anxious, and not managing to kind of manage and continuing to feel that, they should really contact a mental health professional, a psychologist, a psychiatrist. They can also phone SADAG, which is the South African Depression and Anxiety Support Group, for referral. And of course, the GEV also has mental health support. So it's just important to say that if things feel really like you're struggling, that must be taken seriously. It mustn't be allowed to go on for too long. But of course, it's difficult to know, because we're all struggling.
But isn't that one of the most important things in the whole management of this all, and trying to direct ourselves to some more harmony in our lives, that we still have the ability to talk, and we still have the ability to contact, whether it's we have them. I think that this has taught us all the value of all the technology that we have at our disposal, and we certainly need to use it. It may not be exactly the same as seeing somebody face to face, but to utilize the ability to contact and to make that contact and to speak and to share, because surely in the idea of sharing our issues and sharing our problems or the things that we're struggling with, not only does the sharing alleviate some of the issues, but certainly four eyes can see more than two, and two heads and two minds coming together, whether it's a psychologist or whether it's a health professional or a friend. All of these things are very beneficial to the human condition, and certainly from a Jewish point of view, the idea of sharing and caring for each other is of paramount importance.
Absolutely. And I think that sort of really fits in with what we're talking about, because communication is key. And it, so family therapists, marital therapists will always say, what's happening with the communication? And so that's just in normal times, but now we're in really abnormal times. And what we're finding is that parents and adults, all of us, are struggling with the kinds of anxieties that we never thought we would see in our lifetimes. We've all been through anxieties in difficult times, but this is unprecedented. Now, how does one manage one's own anxieties and all the sorts of things that maybe are happening, and manage to contain children's anxieties in the home? You know, how does one do that all at the same time? And that's a big thing that parents are struggling with at the moment. And of course, it depends, depending on how old children are, how, you know, the family, there can be grown-up children, very little children, there are different challenges. But the one thing that's really, really important in any kind of a family health is that the parents need to form a close, cohesive parental system. And that needs to be separate from the children. And what I mean by that, it might sound strange, but there's something about speaking to one's spouse, speaking to other adults, and as you were saying, taking the time to process feelings together, fears, the unknown, so that one can then go to one's children with more of a kind of sense of digested emotions. Because if you pretend that everything's okay, or you come to things with a sense that you have to fix things for your family, you have to tell your children everything's going to be okay, that's not good. And I think parents so wanted to help their children with anxiety. And none of us like our children to be frightened. And it's one thing when your kids are scared that there's a monster in the cupboard, or, you know, it's their ghosts, or there's something like that. One feels that it's easier to reassure them and to be a source of comfort. But when you yourself are so anxious and feeling so uncontained, how then can you contain your children? So going back to having a kind of a bubble around the couple, who are a couple as well as parents, and a bubble in terms of a really sacred space for conversation, discussion, and sharing. And as we know, when we start a family and our families grow, we have less and less time for one another as a couple, and more of one's energy goes to being parents. It's a difficult, very rewarding job, but it's very difficult. And so it's important to remember to keep talking and to sort of think about what is this that we're facing as a family, and how best to talk about it to the children. What's kind of the way that feels most helpful?
Right, and I think that we also, obviously, we have people who are listening, and we need to be cognizant, and we are, of the fact that not everybody's family structure is the perfect mother and father and children. There are many single parents who may be listening. There are older people, lonely people, people who are absolutely alone. And I think that part of the message needs to be that we are really never alone. There is always someone to talk to, and a Jew is really never alone, because we have God in our lives. We have a godly direction, and so we're not negating or in any way belittling the idea of a person alone, or of a single person family. But in every realm, I think, of this experience over the last few months, all the boundaries that you were referring to have actually come tumbling down. School is at home, and work is at home, and people are operating at home in ways and in means that we're not really used to. And, you know, it was always, I guess, one of my pet peeves, and I guess of many people, that, you know, cell phones came to the table. Well, right now, while we're talking, people might be listening to us over the dinner table. There are certain things that have impacted on the sanctity of life in general, and the sanctity of family life in general. And as you mentioned there, the gaps between parents and children, the idea of perhaps keeping certain things private and keeping them away from the kids at a certain stage, or because the knowledge of them, or the fear that it might instill in the children, is something that you certainly don't want the kids to be impacted by. But that has all perhaps fallen out with the advent of COVID-19, and we have to be cognizant of the fact that these things are so important. It is so important to have the boundaries, the borders, and the mechanisms within our family life to be able to still deal with a husband and wife relationship as a husband and wife, the children relationship with the parents, and not let everything just blend together in a real spiral, because it will spiral out of control if it's not cared for and if it's not looked after.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad you mentioned about that not all families are the kind of two parents and the children. And a number of families, there are single parents. And so it really is about finding support, friends, you know, siblings, etc., as you're saying, but some kind of adult support, because we all need support at this time to manage to be kind of leading our families. And, you know, most of us at this stage don't feel like we're leading anything anywhere, because we really don't know where things are going. But there's something about being okay with that, being okay with not knowing, but doing the best we can. Because, you know, in our lives before, there was something about being able to plan things, having timelines, where one has the illusion that, you know, life is all sorted and everything's on track and it's this thing and it's the next thing. And now all of that has come away. So in terms, though, of what children need, you know, I think it's important on the one hand to have those boundaries so that we don't ourselves use our children to contain us. And, you know, we all just try our best as parents, but that's not good for children. But on the other hand, to pretend that things are not the way they are is also a problem, because children read parents' body language, you know, like nothing else. And what we say to our children and what they pick up in our nonverbals, in our body language, our children know exactly when we're stressed, exactly when we're not saying the way we really feel. So it's about getting that balance where one's processed enough of our feelings, and whether that means with friends, spouse, and even maybe starting some kind of therapy or counseling, finding ways to just carry on from day to day so that you can answer the kinds of questions that children ask at this time. And, you know, having younger children want to know why they can't play with their friends, why they can't go to school, what is this virus, they don't understand, which is very difficult. How not to frighten them, but also to not, you know, not to be sort of false. And on the other hand, when children are older, they know enough to be very worried. And there aren't answers one can give a child like, we'll be fine, it's not going to affect us. But you can give an answer that is honest and authentic. We're going to try the best we can. You know, the smartest people in the world are working on this. There's going to be some light shared at some stage, and we'll be okay. If we do this, we'll try our best. We'll try and manage things as we go along. So a kind of a, you know, some kind of a showing of a thinking about and being in reality, rather than as if you have rose-tinted spectacles, which makes children feel very insecure, actually.
Correct. And I think that in addition to that, and you're I think leading up to something that I wanted to talk about this evening as well, which is the idea of having a purpose, of realizing that our home and our family is as much a you know, we've spoken about it with the shutting of the shuls, you know, so now your home has become your shul. That's where we daven. That's where we have our services. That's where we are on Friday nights. That's where we are on Shabbos. The importance of the home is, and always was, of paramount importance in every Jewish realm. There are more things that are done from a Jewish point of view at home that are done in shul. We have the obligation to see to it that the home is safe, that it's secure, that we are giving all the right messages, that we are leading by example. You touched on there that the kids pick up everything from the parents, and the kids pick up much more from the parents' behaviors and nuances than they possibly do from what the parents say. They rather pick up from what the parents do. And when there is that kind of an awareness, and when we all are living to and living towards some kind of a purpose, that there's a purpose to the home, that there is a godly purpose, of course, from a Jewish point of view, that there's a godly purpose to the home, and that we're all in working in some kind of a direction. Well, then the idea of telling kids or saying to the family that, you know, I thought I was in full control, but ultimately only God is in control, is very, very acceptable and very beautiful. And it helps to encourage the kids to feel that sense of security within the chaos. The fact that everything has been disrupted and everything is different and difficult, it does enable us to at least have a path that we're treading on, that we're blazing, working and walking together as a unit, as a family. Yes, some are going to be the followers and some are going to be the leaders, and perhaps you might get the strength from your kids actually and their simple faith from time to time that, wow, I wish I could have that, and we could emulate their example. But the idea of having a purpose, a goal, and that life is more meaningful than just about waking up in the morning and going to work and coming home, going to gym, etc. It's given us an opportunity perhaps to explore some of the deeper meanings behind what our family actually stands for, and to have that as a thread that we can all hold on to, and that we can all walk along, and that we can all encourage each other. And in that way, I think we're bringing a sense of security to everybody.
So while you were talking, Rabbi, a psychological concept came to mind, and it's really a way of living. And it's called mindfulness. And I think a lot of people may know about it because it's become quite popular. But it's something about, you know, living fully in the moment and being very open and very receptive, and not living in the automatic way that you know, you were saying, all of our routine things that we did. Maybe in the past, because things just were the way they were, you know, it's much easier to do that. One has to call oneself back and focus and be mindful. But this can really be an opportunity, because things have changed so radically, and we've really had to go back to basics in so many different ways, you know, being stuck at home, and there's some positives in that. Children are delighted to have their parents around, but maybe sometimes not. Different families, there can be challenges, etc. But each person in just living in a very mindful way, appreciating, you know, I think the poem at the beginning was something about that, just appreciating the things in life that we do have, that we are grateful for, you know, enjoying your cup of coffee in the morning in a way that's not just where you don't see and you don't know and you just go through the motions, having a conversation, you know, going out and looking at the garden. There's a way of actually being more alive and in tune that is a very different kind of a state of being, I suppose, to wanting quick fixes and having everything now. And, you know, we all fall into different patterns and kind of ways of pushing things and going further and faster and wanting more. And this really has put a halt to that. It's very difficult for people to carry on as if life hasn't changed. And it's about using that as an opportunity, finding a sense of purpose in the ordinary, and then also of higher purpose, and then also different sorts of, you know, maybe what people's passionate hobbies are, what things they really enjoy and love doing. Those are really the things that give a sense of harmony and happiness, rather than, you know, you're going to a party or there's some significant highlight. Those things are few and far between. It's more about the everyday little joys that we need to look for again, and focus on, I think.
And I think that, you know, where Judaism comes with a number of very, very fascinating clues and ideas about harmony in the home. Perhaps if I may suggest one or two, you have something like the Mezuzah on the door. I wonder if anybody and everybody has ever thought about the power of the Mezuzah on the door. the idea of the mezuzah has become synonymous with protection. So we're protected when we have that mezuzah on the door. But have you ever thought about, and just to think in these terms, the idea of the mezuzah, we place the mezuzah on the door pointing inwards. It's slanted and it's pointing inwards. So first of all, why is it slanted? And secondly, why does it point inwards? Well, perhaps the pointing inwards is almost like an arrow that is pointing that inside here, in this place, there is a little Beit HaMikdash. There is a little sanctuary. There is something that is sacred. There is something that is special. And each time that children and family and people walk past that, there's the recognition of that. And it's dafka placed. It's placed in the space between outside and inside. Well, we can't go outside that much. We're spending a lot more time inside now. But there's also the idea of the things that have always been extraneous to us outside, and how and when we allow those in, and how and when we block them. The idea of the mezuzah being slanted on the doorpost, famously, it was Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam, two great sages, who actually had a dispute, although they lived some years apart, the dispute of whether the mezuzah should be straight up or whether it should be horizontal. When we read the Torah, it's flat. When we look at the mezuzah, Rashi, the famous sage, says that it should be straight on the doorpost. And his grandson, Rabbeinu Tam, said, no, it should actually be lying down. It's disrespectful for the mezuzah to have to stand up all the time. And in fact, the idea of the mezuzah being at a slant is not only to try and make them both happy and keep both ideas in one, that we're compromising, but it's really the idea of compromise, that in a home, when there are different opinions, and perhaps now when we've been thrust together, one of the things in the world out there, unfortunately, I guess, with this pandemic, has been, that people are on top of each other, and you get the problems of abuse and so on that take place at home, unfortunately. But the idea of the mezuzah is a constant reminder and creating that atmosphere of the fact that no opinion is hard and fast when it comes to personal opinions. Yes, our laws are hard and fast, and Torah is not to be abrogated, and we keep our principles. But when it comes to each other's opinions, compromise. And the idea of the slanted mezuzah perhaps points to that as well. And when we can have that kind of atmosphere in the home, that we're going to discuss things and there's going to be some compromise, and we're going to blaze a trail together, and we're not going to send our kids mixed messages, perhaps that's just a little bit of a reminder from something that we sort of take for granted on a daily basis as we walk past a mezuzah in the home.
Yeah, that's really lovely.
So I think that the idea of constant communication is of paramount importance. The idea of making sure that we have certain purpose, the idea that we have principles that we don't compromise on, that we don't break those principles. Just the fact that there happens to be, everybody's using COVID-19 as an excuse for anything and everything. It certainly shouldn't be an excuse for us having a breakdown of principles, a breakdown of honesty, of integrity, of morality, and so on, that have always been near and dear to us as well.
Doctor, here's a question for you. A person is battling to find balance while he's working from home. He's really finding the balance with his family. It's very difficult for him, and he'd like some down-to-earth advice from you.
So I think this is a problem that a lot of people are having, because a lot of people have structured their work life and their home life very separately, and they've thought about their sort of their self and their persona at work, which is very different to their home life. But now those have become combined just out of necessity. And, a few ideas that one can think of are, for example, setting aside, if one can, a particular room and a particular space in the house, if it's possible, where you work, that is separate, and that there's a kind of, that's discussed in the family and it's respected, so that when you are then with your family, you are, you know, fully present with them. And when you're working, that's also separate. Of course, a lot of that can depend on things that are out of people's control. Like some people just don't have homes that are big enough to do that. And it's very challenging, and with young children as well. And young children, you know, they're not happy if they know their parents are at home to leave their parents. They want to come show you things and tell you things. So it can really be quite heartbreaking to have to tell them no and to set those boundaries. And whether it's working out before things that the kids can do, things that they'll be busy with, that you know, to try and kind of demarcate that time where you can do your work and focus on it, and time spent at home. I think, and I'm not sure, you know, this exact situation, it can be different, the issues for different people, but a lot of people are finding that because they're working from home, they also don't then stop working. They carry on and on and on. There's no stop like there would be if you get in the car and drive home. And that really is a problem, because you can get completely consumed by your work. It can give you a sense of purpose to block out reality, and that's not healthy. That's not going to end well. So I'm not sure if I've addressed that exact struggle that came with the question.
You have. Somebody else asks as follows. There's a double standard. Kids are allowed to go to all different places, but they're not allowed to go to school. And here's somebody who's really battling. His kids are really battling at home, and he'd like to ask some down-to-earth advice on how to deal with that and what to tell his kids.
Yeah, I mean, it's very difficult. And I think, you know, we have to, whatever we think of the decisions made by the government, you know, I have a sense that I would never want to be a member of the government and a decision maker at this time, because whatever decision you make, someone thinks you've got it wrong. In fact, huge groups of people think you've got it wrong. So the decisions about schooling, you know, is a case in point, and it's very complicated. How do you balance things when, you know, if we ourselves don't maybe think it's logical, or there's certain things that don't make sense, and why is this more high risk than that, etc., then how do you convey it to your children in a way that they can accept? And again, maybe it's something about saying, look, these are the decisions, and no one really knows right now, but these are the laws at the moment, and you can't go to school, and just talk those things through with your children, because there really are limits on what we can do. Our freedoms and our rights that we used to just take for granted before, now we long for those days. You know, there's something about that where you really have to kind of accept restrictions that we never thought we'd have to have. So, you know, whatever the struggles are in this question that's been asked, and there aren't really specifics, it really is about talking about it and knowing and admitting that there are, you know, discrepancies. But sometimes we have to follow the law of the country, because that's what we have to do, even if we don't agree with it.
And here's another question directed at both of you. Now that people have to spend much more time together, and all of a sudden, maybe this is for newlyweds, you're discovering, hold on a second, because based on the astrological sign, or because of nurture, the person I'm living with is naturally negative. And if somebody's naturally negative and heavy, can that person change their disposition, or is that them? What do I live with now? Can you change?
Doctor, you go first.
So I'm not going to comment on astrology. That's certainly not in my skill set. You know, I think to say someone's naturally negative, we know that nature and nurture there's nature, there's nurture, there's temperament. And yes, of course, change is possible. That's what therapy is about. But the person needs to want to change. So that's a whole separate thing. But I think what you're highlighting is people are coming to know one another in different ways than maybe they would have before, because it's very different when you can spend time together, and then we've all got these different things, and our lives are so busy to come and go, so that you know, if someone's frustrated or they just need time out, that was very easy before, or a lot easier than it is now, let's say that. And so having to actually sit with things in the family, in your partner, in your friends, that you wouldn't normally have known about, that you now have to confront, you know, is a big challenge. And again, it's about talking about it. And if it's something that is an issue, then finding ways to talk about it where we all are responsible for our behavior, and, you know, maybe not understanding if someone's negative, they might be incredibly anxious at this time, that might be pushing on anxieties that you didn't know about, that are from their past, that are, you know, particular fears they have, etc. Some of us do better with uncertainty than others. Some of us are just more flexible. Again, there's so much in our histories that make us who we are, but something like this, a crisis like this, and a kind of trauma of selfhood, but that we're all experiencing in different ways, brings out different things. So to be empathic, but to sort of, you know, have conversations about it, that's the important thing, rather than a sense of, oh my gosh, you know, I didn't know this person was like this. If I had known before, I may not have made the decision to choose them as my partner. You know, it's important. These are not normal times.
They're not normal times, but I think that from certainly, and you mentioned it there, people can change, and people can be nurtured, and they can be helped, and they can be directed. And I think that we have these unique opportunities at a time like this to, at the same time as we're learning more about each other, but we can learn more about life. We can learn more about things that can help us. There is so much that is out there, and we all need help from time to time, and we all are vulnerable, and we all have our issues, our problems, our deficiencies. But isn't the whole purpose of life in general, and particularly at a difficult time, to really see what we're truly made of, what is within us deep down, and again, not to give up on the things that are of paramount importance. So to spend more time, as you said, not only talking to each other, but to spend more time valuing and evaluating properly all the things that really can guide us and keep our home on the right track and keep things harmonious. You know, if I may just give another example, you know, on a Friday night we light Shabbat candles, and the Shabbat candles that are lit, there are traditionally two, and the two candles, perhaps like the two chalot, are also about Shamor v'Zachor b'dibur echad, that when Hashem gave us the mitzvah of Shabbos, that He told us that we must keep it and we must remember it, and so on. And the idea of the candles being two, perhaps, is also this idea of not only me and my alter ego, or me and my spouse, me and my partner, or me and the others within the family, but it's the idea that singly and alone we can create a certain amount of light, but when we're joined together, we bring a tremendous amount of light that is now working in harmony. And there is also the harmony between the physical and the spiritual, because a candle represents the concept of the body and the soul. So we have, once again, this idea of a harmony, that when there is that harmony, it brings more light. So when you sit back and say, perhaps, you know, I got to give up on this person, you're so negative and there's no way that I can get with you. Well, maybe there is therefore as much a deficiency in me who is saying that, as there is perhaps in you who doesn't seem to be able to see it. And perhaps with things like Shabbos candles, as we mentioned before, the Mezuzah on your door, these atmospheric things that we can place around us, while they sound simple and they sound small, but the idea of symbols and signs and things of creating harmony, creating that harmony within our spiritual selves and creating that harmony within our physical selves, creating an atmosphere that is compromising and harmonious. Surely that will also be a method and a way of bringing out the best in each other, of making sure that the person who you thought was so negative perhaps is there to challenge you and to enable you to actually find the positivity within them. It's fascinating, I think, that today when you're pronounced to be positive, that actually that's a negative. But that's just a little aside here about COVID-19. Are there any other questions, perhaps, that we need to answer before we wrap up?
Doctor, yes, another one for you, and that is as follows. Parents feel necessary to limit screen time. Can you give advice on what that balance should be? How much time kids should be allowed to spend on screens, internet, etc.?
So I think that's also a difficult one. And I think there's a lot of research that parents can do online, the exact amount of screen time for children. But I think, there's a broader question here maybe, that I think a lot of parents put so much pressure on themselves during this time with things like that, which are, it mustn't be more than an hour or whatever it is, where actually sometimes, if the parents are depleted, they just need a little bit of time out. And the only way to get time out is if their kids are watching something, they're playing something. It's winter, it's hard to have them play outside with any kind of enthusiasm. It's actually going to be more beneficial for children to be in front of the screen then and have parents who have gone away, who have relaxed, who have had a little sleep or whatever it is, than forcing oneself to keep to some kind of sort of regime that one has in one's head of, what good parenting looks like. And I think there's so much pressure on young people today. And I think even, I remember with my children who are now more grown, but, newer parents, about what is good parenting and what isn't. And it becomes something that, we move completely away from a broader idea of actual harmony in the home to kind of this tick box of things that you shouldn't be doing and what children should be eating and what this and that. And actually, if things are like that, like a conveyor belt of activities, that's not an environment that children can thrive in either. So I think there really has to be balance. Of course, read up. No one wants their children staring at a screen the whole day. But on the other hand, we really must never strive for perfection, but certainly not now. Any kind of balance and survival, that's all that one must aim for. People must be kind to themselves. These are very, very difficult times. We just have to survive these times, trying our best and, not working out every day, setting goals for our children, having everything worked out. That's really not the right way. People will burn out like that.
I think you also touched on, Doctor, you touched on something very important there, which is the idea of looking after yourself, which perhaps we haven't emphasized enough. Is in all of this, you still need some me time. You need some time to look after yourself, collect your own thoughts, see to your own well-being, make sure that you're properly not only protected, but that you're properly physically and spiritually nourished. It's all very well, and we do often feel that we need to go out there and save the world, but we've got to look out for ourselves as well in order to be able to do that.
Absolutely. I mean, self-care must come first. And I know a lot of parents, especially mothers, find it difficult. They feel selfish taking care of themselves. But actually, if you don't take care of yourself, you won't have the resources to take care of your family. And so there really is that balance. And you wouldn't drive your car without petrol. And it really is the equivalent. So that's very, very important. Self-care and being kind to oneself and lowering expectations.
Have anything to add?
I just wanted to say what an honor it's been to hear from you, Doctor, and to share these thoughts, and to realize the great responsibility that we all have. And perhaps a final point that I just wanted to make was, and perhaps it even applies to the single person homes, is that part of the purpose that perhaps we can develop within ourselves and our homes is the human condition, I think, is one that needs to be giving. I think the worst thing of all is when we're not givers. That in a way is when we kind of stop living. We need to be giving. We need to be doing for others. So yes, parents are doing for kids, and kids need to do for parents, and spouse for spouse, and so on. But if we can spend some time thinking about what we, either as a single or as a couple or as a family, can do for others, that surely helps with our purpose. So to be kind and to be generous and to do good things for others, to have that as a little bit of a purpose within the family, I think would go a long way to helping us bring harmony, because that in itself makes us feel fulfilled and, as you said before, nourished, and it certainly puts a kind of a petrol in the tank as well.
So what I've taken from tonight, just listening of you and watching, is, Doctor, be kind to yourself, be kind to your family. Do not expect absolute excellence at the moment. Balance your life. Make sure you've got mezuzahs on your doors, light Shabbos candles, and the home will be a peaceful island that it should be. And both of you, thank you so much for joining. And Doctor, you're going to be doing another few webinars for us. So thank you so much for doing this. It's so needed at this time. So thank you both. Aaron, over to you.
Rabbi Katz and Dr. Kadish, thank you both for agreeing to be panelists on tonight's webinar. It goes without saying, as mentioned, how important this topic was before COVID and how much more so now during the crisis. And tonight has certainly given us, me and everyone I'm sure watching,